We know once after that all wealthy societies in the world have in common. They have long base of trust in those societies. Break down the trust chains, you get poorer, right? So the thing with game theory is that game theory is an alternative version of doing larger populations so you can scale up. And because you scale up, you can then have the benefit of trust. You do this artificially with Bitcoin. I see technology developing so quickly and so many people are on board. And that's why I love the Bitcoin cult. I don't have a problem at all this going religious. I think it should be because then people are willing to die for this idea. Brilliant. Okay. Because it's that good. Okay. Now, if that's the case, then any flaw that pops up because the chest isn't really nailed yet will be solved very quickly by technologists who understand the magic of Bitcoin.
Welcome back to the Freedom Footprint Show, a Bitcoin philosophy show with Knut Svanholm and me, Luke the Pseudofin. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Alexander Bard. He's originally famous, especially in Sweden, for his music career, but he's since turned to philosophy. He's the co-author of 5 books, soon to be 6, and he's a major proponent of Syntheism, a movement focused on how atheists and pantheists can achieve the same feelings of community and awe as experienced in traditional theistic religions. This is a wide-ranging talk on many topics we've never covered before. We deep dive into AI, game theory, centralization and decentralization, religion, the idea of the shamanic or shamanoid individual, attentionalism and capitalism, trust. The list goes on and on. But at the core, we discuss the revolution of Bitcoin. Get ready for this great episode, but before we start, we'd like to quickly remind you that the best way you can support the show is to send us a boost or stream us some sats on a value for value podcasting app like Fountain. If you're listening to this show as a podcast, consider checking out Fountain if you haven't already. You can earn sats from listening to podcasts, and you can support your favorite shows through value for value. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a weekly episode. And finally, we want to thank today's sponsors: Orange Pill app, Wasabi Wallet, and Consensus Network. All their information is in the description. We'll be talking a little more about them later. And so, without further ado, here is Alexander Bard on the Freedom Footprint Show. Alexander Bard, welcome to the Freedom Footprint Show. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here, Alexander. We've been thinking about talking for a long time, and now we're finally here. Nice to finally meet you. Yeah, tjena. So Alexander has been hopping in and out of my life via the television set during even my childhood. I think you started with Army of Lovers even in the 80s, right? If I'm not, or like the beginning of the 90s, like somewhere around there.
Okay, so this is the story.
Yeah.
Max Tegmark and I both went to the Stockholm School of Economics in parallel in the 1980s.
All right.
In 1989, we were both finished. He wanted something more than economics and decided to pursue physics and mathematics. I wanted something more than economics and decided to pursue culture and art and eventually philosophy. So today when Max and I meet, and it's all the whole AI hype, we're two sides of the AI hype at the moment. It's kind of fun and ironic. We used to know each other when we were young, but it makes sense that Max became, a Platonist Kantian, because that you become if you do physics and mathematics and stay there, right? Whereas Savin also did music and art and drugs and sex and all kinds of shit. And therefore now I'm a philosopher, which is an art form. Philosophy is an art form, not a science. I'm a philosopher. But as a philosopher, of course, my perspective is different. So I'm a Hegelian, Nietzschean philosopher, rather than the sort of Platonist Kantian that Max Tegmark has become. So I'm not really worried about AI at all. I embrace it completely.
All right. That's
Finally,
excellent.
shit's happening and Bitcoin's taking off and everything. This is great. This is a great time to live.
We, as a Bitcoiner, I'd like to quote Terry Pratchett about AI, one of my favorite quotes, and that is, real stupidity beats artificial intelligence every time. And I think that is what Bitcoin is. It's real stupidity being the last line of defense against Skynet for human beings.
Oh, yeah. But I tell you what, AI, for all the hype around ChatGPT, I'm always telling people that it's not that I'm interested in what just happened. There was nothing dramatic. It's just that the perspective shifted. AI awareness is suddenly a big thing. Okay. People got something else than climate to talk about. Apparently AI is now terrifying them. I'm always telling people that the real terror started on August the 6th, 1945. We created the bomb. That means humanity has already created the devil. That means history since 1945 is chasing up with the fact we created the devil and we're trying to create a god to stop the devil or push the devil back into the bottle where he got out of. That's essentially history. That's why the paradigm shift happened in 1945. With everything that's happening now with the internet, I just call it the internet, with algorithms, with crypto, Bitcoin, we're going to sort that out in this conversation, obviously, and with AI next. All of these things are just results of network dynamics. Now, this is just the technological version of network dynamics. Nature is full of the very messy biological version of it. So let's talk about biological intelligence, which we hopefully have, the three of us here. And then technological intelligence as something entirely different altogether. And you're absolutely right. Technological intelligence is basically tons of stupidity, but ordered stupidity. And then you put tons of electricity onto it and maybe tons of data as well, and you get something out of it. But it's nothing beyond that so far. Nothing beyond that at all. I think we have to go, biological with the technology to create something really is God. So when I'm saying that we're creating God at the moment, I'm saying it's a very distant God, and it's going to be very, very messy before God appears.
Yeah. I'd say there's a good case to be made for keeping him distant if it is God. Would you say the follow-up question to the invention of the bomb, do you think that the bomb would ever have been invented or discovered, for that matter, if the central bank hadn't preceded it as a... I view the central bank as being like the real devil here, and the real thing that
I think it's an eternal struggle between centralization and decentralization. So I'm interested in splitting power. I think the three of us agree on this one thing. This is great if power is split, preferably in designed ways. It cannot be unified. There are a lot of people out there called Platonists. They're called Confucians in Asia. And they love the idea of the one. And they love the idea of the one so much that they're ready to submit to a tyrant if a tyrant comes along. The problem with tyranny is not a moral one. I'm not against tyranny for moral reasons. I'm against tyranny because it's a really bad design. It's a design problem. People these days, it took 7 fucking months for anybody in China to dare to tell Xi Jinping that a virus had leaked out of the laboratory in Wuhan. And those 7 months, the delay caused by that, killed 30 million people. That's tyranny. That's the problem with tyranny. In the new book, Pros and Event, it's my 6th book with Jan Sedekis. We're re-releasing all the 6 books. And obviously, we've written about this for years. And, Syntheism, creating God of the Internet Age came out 10 years ago. The Global Empire came out 20 years ago. These books have said all these things all along. So we're basically just summarizing our career, saying, we told you so. We're 62 years old. We're going to wine, women, and song, and drugs, and fun from now on, and basically comment on our work, because we've written our 6 books. But in Process and Event, we open the book by saying that Stalin died through starvation. He was starved to death because his doctors decided that none of us dared to go into the room and tell the old fuck that he's about to die, because then he chops our heads off. So the last 5 days of Stalin's life, he starved to death. And when he had starved to death and become a corpse, totally alone, lonely, dictators always lonely. So when they ran in and turned him into God, gave him a mausoleum, and made him one of the Egyptian pharaohs, essentially, which is like, the pharaoh of the Soviet Union. So the problem is tyranny, and the problem is centralization. And there's this enormous desire historically from a lot of little boys out there to submit to the one and go up into the oneness.
Yep.
And against that oneness, I say, but there's another way of doing, which is that multiplicity is a really great thing.
Absolutely.
Like I said, that I don't understand why philosophers should start with the question being versus nothing.
All right. So there are a couple of things to unpack here. first of all, have you read or heard about the book The White Pill by Michael Malice?
Yes.
Have you read it?
Yes.
It depicts the last days of Stalin in that same way.
Yeah,
and
it's credited in our books.
It's a very beautiful book. I highly recommend it. It tells a very, story-like story about the rise and fall of the Soviet Union. So that's very nice. The other thing is the thing I'd like this conversation. One of the directions I want this conversation to go is that I want to prove to you that this decentralization and multiplicity and that thing that you talk about, and the diversity of ideas and the diversity, that Bitcoin is that, and all the shitcoins are paths to Stalinism.
I'm convinced already, but Zach, I've got a lot of followers watching this podcast. So let's go through why Bitcoin is so fucking brilliant. You see all the possible advantages of a tyranny without being a tyranny. That's exactly why it's so fantastic.
Okay, so can I give you the walkthrough of my interpretation of what this thing is, and then you can agree and disagree, and we can have a conversation about that.
Sure.
So the first and foremost thing is something I call the one-shot principle, which is in my second book, and I try to put down into words as short as possible why this can only be discovered once. So the way I put it, I call it the one-shot principle, and the thing I said was absolute scarcity absolute mathematical scarcity or finiteness in a sufficiently decentralized distributed network it was a discovery rather than an invention. It can only be discovered once, since the very thing discovered was resistance to replicability itself. But only be discovered once by people aware of this discovery. So a tribe on like a marooned on an island that has no contact with the rest of civilization, they could theoretically come up with the same thing. But if you're aware that this thing exists, you cannot replicate this resistance to replicability, because the very thing that you can't replicate is the network effect that you have from. From my perspective, Bitcoin is the last cryptocurrency and not the first one. There were preceding ones. They didn't work.
There are more reasons for that. We can go back to them later.
Yeah. So the other thing, when I get the question nowadays, what is Bitcoin? My shortest answer is it's an agreement on a fixed set of rules. And a bit longer version is an agreement on a fixed set of rules, wherein which it's more expensive to people to try to cheat than to follow the rules. Which is why all the incentives lead to everyone following the rules in the long run. And I view shitcoining as cheating. And in the long run, it's more expensive. You might be able to make a quick buck, but it won't make you a better person, and it won't save your grandchildren. So it's costlier from a strict praxeological sense, not maybe in a short-term fiat gain financial sense. But that's not what we're talking about here.
No, can I just add one thing here? This is about this. We can do those today.
Yeah.
This is what's called game theory. And here's the brilliance with game theory.
Exactly.
When you are loyal to your own tribe, you stay loyal to your own tribe. I've never seen a tribe in New Guinea or the jungle of Brazil or anything that needed the police inside or the military to protect them, because it was small enough for everybody to be loyal to each other. When you go to larger populations, which is what we studied in the New Process event, and when you start inventing things like empire, nation, city in the Bronze Age, you have enormous problems you need to solve. And these are trust issues, because the more trust you can create with the system, the more profitability, wealth, etc. you create. We know once after that all wealthy societies in the world have in common. They have long days of trust in those societies. Break down the trust chains, you get poorer, right? So the thing with game theory is that game theory is an alternative version of doing larger populations so you can scale up. And because you scale up, you can then have the benefit of trust. You do this artificially with Bitcoin.
I think this is an emergent property of Bitcoin. So when you actually achieve this trust in the base layer of society, you can build everything on top of that, and it's like one divided by clown world. We get closer to the truth all the time in Bitcoin, further away from the truth all the time in clown world.
Yeah. And the word for this, it was invented in Persia 3,700 years ago. It is called sociant. Sociant is the function that suddenly enters history and changes everything forever.
Yeah.
Sociant was later translated by the Jews in Babylon into Messiah, which is the word Messiah.
Oh, nice.
So what we're talking about something truly messianic. But sociant is a function. So it's really important to understand that Persia thought of this 3,700 years ago. Zoroastrian Persia realized that everything doesn't have to be a repetition of the same. Things can happen that change the world forever. And when something happens that changes the world forever, he called it the sociant.
Yeah. Another pet peeve of mine is to fight this Bitcoin as a cult narrative and say that this is financial atheism. It's the opposite of a cult. We're the only ones.
What's wrong with having a cult?
Yeah.
Fine for being a cult.
Well, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying that there's another viewpoint and there's another way of looking at this, and that is that fiat is the cult, because a dollar bill or a Swedish krona, you have to believe that this is somewhat scarce. You have to take that at face value. In Bitcoin, you can verify every step. So it's
like defending an old hag when you're just about to marry a beautiful young woman.
That's a perfect.
Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Why would I defend the old hag?
So the other thing about Bitcoin being the actual decentralization is that it's an agreement on a fixed set of rules. So the best analogy I can come up with is the chess analogy. If you know the rules of chess, like the last time chess was changed was the passant move. Do you know that in chess, when you can take a pawn by that had just moved 2 steps forward, you can take him, and that was introduced like 1,200 years ago, and the game has stayed the same since, which is truly fascinating. Because even today, like if a big chess organization came up with, we're going to change the rules now, people wouldn't play by those rules. They would play by the consensus rules. So if you know how to play chess properly, you can play with every other chess player in the world. You can choose to play it differently. You can choose to play without pawns. You can choose to play without rooks, or as I like to say, you can choose to play on a 64 times 64 squared board with no pieces, and then you're playing chess cash. Or you can play chess that changes the rules with every move, and then you're playing chess theorem. Or you can play chess where nobody knows how many pieces there really are, and you're playing chess narrow. And these are all the shitcoins. They might be fun, and you might be able to play with 5 or 6 people, but they're not going to last. They're not built to last. This thing is built to last. So, yeah, take it away.
I can add one thing here. So if you had, say, a sound, good skeptic who, like me, was really impressed by the Bitcoin design when Bitcoin came out and realized this is forever the future, it's going to be one of the major aspects of the internet society. So the skeptic would have said, okay, but any system designed ever has always some flaws that you'll discover eventually, or the technology wasn't available, or a certain thought could not have been thought yet. When I was convinced that Bitcoin wasn't Alta Vista, was Google, or more than Google, it's like, this is going to stay, right? That was when I started realizing that a lot of technologists out there, engineers basically, had looked at the flaws of the Bitcoin design and were already working through and developing technologies to cover those flaws. That shows how brilliant the design was from the very beginning. It's like you said, that somebody built a fucking platform that was so ingeniously thought through that even if you stop building the building for a while, you realize this is going to be the biggest skyscraper ever. And once you realize, people are building on the skyscraper, they've realized the platform works. They're not even interested in building on any other platform. All these sort of brain power goes into this one thing. And the closest examples of it that could have been its biggest competitors have major problems, flaws that either haven't thought of one thing, so they ditch there, or either haven't thought of one thing and they ditch there. So the two ditches on this side of Bitcoin is full of Monero and these other standards, right? Yeah. So Bitcoin stays very firmly in the middle. And I got totally convinced when I started saying, okay, so anything I could have thought of that could have been a flaw in the design, the original design, which is fantastic, any of those flaws can be overcome. Okay, then all brain power is going to go into Bitcoin. It is like game over with everything else.
Yeah, the game theory works on that level too. Because if you think about what the consensus, like when a Bitcoin improvement proposal comes, basically the entire networks needs to agree that it's a good change for it to actually change. Which another way of saying that is that it can only become better over time, because we define better by what happens in Bitcoin. So and by proxy, that means that humanity can only get better over time. And this is what I find so insanely fascinating. Because, but this is the other point I want to make, because I think you'll really love this take. And that is, what is a computer? What does it do? I always say my computer identifies as non-binary, but it is binary. So it's pretending to not be binary by showing me a picture of you now. But it's not really a picture of you, it's ones and zeros in a row. So a computer is nothing but a fancy abacus. And an abacus does one thing. It helps humans with calculation. So it's only an extension of our brains or our brain power. And that's all it is. So all the computers used in Bitcoin, like when I run Umbrel on my Raspberry Pi, my node at home, is that the node? Is the little computer the node? Is the software the node? Or am I the actor who chooses to run it the node? And there's no way around that I am the node and not the abacus I'm using to do the calculations. And the same is true for the ASICs used in mining. The miners are not the computers with the big fans in this big hangar somewhere in China or the US. The miner is the guy with the money, willing to put up the money to run that thing, the one that making a conscious decision to join the network and do that. And the same is when you think about what owning a Bitcoin is, like there's a difference between owning and possession, as you know, like owning is a legal relationship. Possession is when you actually have something physically that you can physically defend. But Bitcoin is neither of that. It's just keeping a secret. So every Bitcoin exists in some person's head or a couple of persons' heads. So everyone in Bitcoin is Bitcoin. They are their own Bitcoins and they are the network. There is nothing differentiating, there's no clear line between technology and people here. What we call technology is not really technology. It's just us doing calculations faster to make this fixed set of rules agreement possible. And that's all it is. So you are your Bitcoin. You aren't your NFT because it can be copied infinitely. It's just a pseudo receipt for something bullshitty. But you are your Bitcoins. And this is what I find so extremely fascinating, because then you realize this is why it's unstoppable, because it is us. If we've found it, a person that has found that we can conduct our relations with each other in this way, in this peaceful, voluntary, consensual way, everyone who's realized that is possible now is going to hop onto that train, because it's way better than violence. If you understand Austrian economics and if you understand the reality of human action and why people do stuff at all, there's just no going back here.
I'm not sure violence will disappear, though. I would disagree.
No, I'm not saying it will, but I'm saying that anyone who could choose to profit from a non-violent way would, even people who are inherently violent will choose. Violence is always costly. There's always a risk involved. And if there's
violence can also be beyond speculation or calculation, for that matter. So the problem is we're dealing with human beings. Human beings are three meta-narratives. This is logos we're talking about here, the zeros and ones of the world. And we're using zeros and ones ourselves. So we make calculations, for example. Then there's the mythos. We can leave that aside for now. And the third one is the pathos. Pathos is feelings, blood, being horny, angry, sad, whatever, hormones. Everything that runs through your system are part of the pathos. And machines do not do pathos at all. They don't do it all. They're strictly the logos and put electricity through them, and they calculate the zeros and ones. They can now, because of the complexity of zeros and ones, also give weight to things, which is the break with AI at the moment. You can give weight to, and you could decide if you're going to give attention and process something rather than something else. But it's still down to zeros and ones. It's just the complexity of mathematics you start using as mathematics gets more complex. You can use more of the power of mathematics. It could be just zeros and ones. Still zeros and ones, still the logos. The perfection of the logos is what the internet will do in AI and things shit like that. And Bitcoin because the Bitcoin being creates is a very, very solid basic platform for value communication.
Yeah,
That's
so
what it does.
Which is that Bitcoin only uses the logos to calculate so we can get to the ethos and the pathos, like that, so they can enable that between people. So the logos is just a small part of it. The people in it that's what important, and what they do and how they choose to interact freely on a free market, like making this libertarian world possible to a certain extent, at least. It's going to be a slow burn. It's going to take a couple of generations, if not 100 generations. But seeing the start of this in our lifetime, that's like, to me, it's bigger than the supposed religion moon landings.
It's a paradigm shift. So like old paradigm shifts, look for where the cracks in the system are. So the cracks in the system are places like El Salvador, for example. And that's where you see the first openings, because the very places in the world of fiat currency is at its weakest. And it's very weak in many places around the planet, The fiat currency we created to accumulate wealth in certain places of the world and basically ruthlessly exploit the others, so we do nothing with them and ignore them. And the cracks in the system are found in these places. And when those cracks are found, I think, for example, right now, the Swiss are pressured by banks in Panama and Dubai to accept Bitcoin standards and then go up against the Federal Reserve. And up against the Federal Reserve and the dollar domination of the world. And all it takes right now, I think the Swiss are sitting and waiting to see what people in Dubai and Panama are doing. And then when the next dollar crash comes, and it always comes sooner or later when the dollar is overvalued and people realize that actually the American government is just spending money they don't have. And most of the dollars been bought by the Chinese. When people discover the next time that happens and the dollar crashes, that's probably the time that the Swiss will join the Panamanians and the Dubaiers and decide that, okay, Americans have no say over us. There's now enough wealthy people on the planet who like to move their money as freely as they like to do the different accounts. Because what's happening at the moment is that the central banks have gone so much into regulation after 2014 that they've overregulated finance completely. I have these wealthy people calling me now saying that, what the fuck's happening? I just wanted to move money between me and my daughter's fucking bank accounts. And the fucking police called me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if they can become Chinese communists, politicians will become Chinese communists. If a bank manager can become a Chinese communist, he will become a Chinese communist. They will never say no to a power they think they can have. What they don't realize is that they're overreaching now through technology immensely. And this means that it's actually the wealthy people of the planet who will join together and become pro-decentralization. Just to keep their fucking wealth. That's what they'll do.
Yeah, but they will lead the rest of the flock eventually, I'm sure.
Exactly. It's always about the elites leading. And then what the rest of humanity will do if they're smart is that they will look at best practice. Oh, what? My neighbor did that? My neighbor got Bitcoin. It was actually helpful and it worked. I will get Bitcoin. I'll go over and ask my neighbor. Oh, my neighbor charges me or introduces me to get a Bitcoin wallet? Good. I'll pay for it. I'm going to consult it. And off you go. You got to fucking market.
Speaking of this, like a nation states and stuff, like the way I see it, there's Bitcoin and then there's custodial Bitcoin, and they're vastly different. And a nation state can only hold custodial Bitcoin, really. You can't have a nation with a multi-sig of 1 million keys, and when you have 51% of them unlocks the Bitcoin. That will never work. So you have to have them custodial, and that's why corporations and nations, they don't really have the Bitcoins. They have some ownership of them by some contract, but there's still some guy somewhere that has the Bitcoins in the sense that he holds the keys, that he's keeping the secret, and he can fuck off at any point in time. This is what changes the dynamics of violence so vastly as well. Like, if I point a gun to your head and say, Alexander, give me all your Bitcoins, you can give me a small part of them, but I can never know as the attacker how many you still have left. And that is true for every person I threaten in the world. So, like, nation states trying to kill this thing, it's just impossible. It's just going to make people more and more resilient every time they try.
That's why the property market in Kiev, Ukraine started working right before the war. What happened was that Kiev was absolutely placed. You would go there. You would see a huge apartment in central Kiev, 7 rooms, and you get the key to the apartment and you pay like $30,000 for it. And the next day somebody came with a gun and said, I'm going to have your apartment. You're not going to get your money back. Until Bitcoin came along and Kiev became the first city in the world where Bitcoin was introduced to control the property market, meaning I paid Instead of paying dollars, I paid the same amount in Bitcoin. I got my apartment and nobody could take it away from me. Now, this is what I mean with let's find the cracks in the system. Cracks in the system are places like Ukraine before the war. It would probably be Ukraine after the war, because the Ukrainians know already how much they can benefit from having Bitcoin within their social system. And the same thing goes to Central America. Places like Honduras, El Salvador, interesting. Why does banking move from Switzerland to Panama? Because the Panamanians are ready to take the fight with the Americans, and the Swiss are not yet. It's like we're setting it up as a war between centralization and decentralization.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is core to that.
Speaking of nation states and democracies and all this, you're a part of the Medborgerlig Samling, which is sort of the most libertarian party in Sweden. And I'm curious.
I'm a member of a new political party, 4,000 members, that is going to fold politics and let politics die.
Yeah, I'm interested in how you're going to do that as a political party, though, because to me, a libertarian political party is sort of oxymoronic.
Listen, we don't have to win elections. Technology will do the work for us. The question is, will technology kill politics mercilessly, or will technology kill politics slowly? I'm deeply involved in the oppositions in Russia and Iran at the moment. I'm incredibly interested in getting rid of Putin. I'm incredibly interested in getting rid of the mullahs in Iran. These are hard causes for me. I've been working in Russia for years, and I'm a converted Zoroastrian, meaning I'm a Persian philosopher. Now, these things are dear to me, but the way to do it is, of course, to try to find out a way where whatever they do, they can't even be part of the new solution. It's the same thing with democracy. Democracy is dead and over. It's gone completely ironic.
And it's inherently leftist.
In a book called The Netocrats, 23 years ago, Jan Söderqvist wrote in chapter 6 that in a short time span, Americans will pick and elect a reality TV show star as their president. It's like Paris in 1789, and you're in the streets of Paris, and this is the new, and the force is there because everybody around you can read, write, count.
Yeah.
Okay? And that all the proofs out there in Versailles, the nobility and the church and the monarchy, none of them can read, write, or count. But they're living at your expense, and you fucking hate them. And you just want to send the guillotine there to kill them, right? So you're making a guillotine because you've got the fucking internet. So you know how to make a guillotine, right? And then somebody next to you says that, yeah, but, we don't have any power here in the streets of Paris. The power is still with the monarch in Versailles. So how are you going to convince the monarch that the revolution is a good idea? And you just go, you don't get it, do you? We got to go out there and kill him. That's where politics is today. And that's where academia is today. That's where mass media is today. This is where fucking, capitalism is, in the sense that advertising is dead and over. Get out.
That's crony capitalism. That's crony capitalism.
Yeah, because what capitalism is now nothing but impact. Capitalism is at the bottom of a whole new system we call attentionalism. So attention, what do you give your attention to, is the only game left. Because if I don't give you attention, you cannot even communicate with me. You don't even reach me. I'm not interested in what you do. You can't sell anything to me. So for capitalism to happen, capitalism has to go attachless. That's why I love the Bitcoin cults. Because Bitcoin has a loyal following of tens of thousands of people. I'm going to live, in Roatan in Honduras this fall. I'm an anthropologist. I live with you guys because I want to figure out people are attracted to these ideas. Why are they the pioneers? And I just think of you guys as like the first guys who went across the Atlantic when America was discovered. And of course, you became the winners, right? It's the same thing here. It's an exodus. It's an exodus out of fiat into Bitcoin. That's what it is.
Yeah, and glad to have you on board the Santa Maria to this new continent. Right? We know how to meme, and we know I call being in Bitcoin living the meme, because that's basically what I'm doing at this point. Everything we meme about become a reality at sooner or later. So you have to be careful with your memes because they all come true at some point.
Today's show is brought to you by our sponsors. First up, Orange Pill app. Stack friends who stack sats. Meet like-minded Bitcoiners near you and speed up hyper-Bitcoinization with Orange Pill app. Bitcoin isn't an online-only phenomenon, and Orange Pill app helps facilitate the social layer, connecting Bitcoiners in their local area. The best part is it maintains your privacy through the whole process, and since you have to subscribe to access the app, you know that everyone there is high signal and cares about Bitcoin. A great new feature is events. You can now create local events and meetups right from the Orange Pill app to help build your local community while maintaining the Bitcoin-only signal. Orange Pill app is available on iOS and Android. Download now. Next up, Wasabi Wallet, an open-source, non-custodial desktop Bitcoin wallet that is trustless, easy to use, and affordable. It has CoinJoin built in to facilitate your privacy. Every Bitcoin transaction leaves a clear footprint, but with Wasabi, you can make sure that others can't track your steps and threaten your sovereignty. Just send your coins to Wasabi, wait, and your coins will be private on the other end. It's open source, trustless by design, and non-custodial. You have full control over your keys. Check it out now at wasabiwallet.io. Double check that link. That's wasabiwallet.io.
So can I ask a question here? I'm interested in what way does Bitcoin relate to the other two giants of the internet, which are the algorithms and AI? What is the relation between Bitcoin as a fantastic new technology, which is truly a paradigm shift, to value communication, the most radical shift ever? What is its relation to the world of the algorithms and to the world of AI?
The way I see it, Bitcoin is not first and foremost a part of the internet. That is giving it too little credit. It's something. It's a way for people to conduct, their affairs with one another without these other systems and without the AIs and without the algorithms. Like we can supersede that now, and we can provide each other with value and get something that we know is going to keep its value over time in return. And what's going on with the internet, like AI is super fascinating, and I love using ChatGPT. But what I don't think, like the real hurdle that AI will not surpass probably in our lifetimes, is real creativity. I mean, it can use everything, every song John Lennon ever wrote and every recording he ever made, and make a perfect replica of a John Lennon song. But it can't have John Lennon's childhood, and it can't have Yoko Ono, and it can't have Paul and George and Ringo. It can't have what made him great in the first place. It can just
it is nothing but induction
so far, and that is just it's basically just my Commodore 64 being faster, and it's very little more than that. It's extremely powerful in itself, but it's not this revolution in intelligence. Calling it intelligence is wrong, in my opinion. It's not intelligence, because to me, intelligence has to have a portion of creativity into it. Intelligence is not what they taught you in school in Sweden, that you have to do group work and write this amount of papers about this bullshit that no one's interested in, and everyone else is doing the same thing. I mean, if you're a straight A student in public school, you excelled at being average. And that's not intelligence at all. Like, intelligence is not doing what you're told.
It's like if we put a lot of prejudices out of the internet in the last 10 years, then AI is going to be nothing but those prejudices recycled. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's why probably Google didn't enter the race yet, because they expect OpenAI to get sued by a lot of people.
Oh, I think they're in the race.
Yes.
I think they're in the race already. I think they've been for a long time. And what was the other thing? AI and
the algorithms.
The algorithms. It's two sides of the same coin. The algorithms is the same thing. We can still, to some extent, choose to which extent we allow ourselves to be manipulated by them. Nostr is a great escape from that, from the algorithms.
Algorithms in themselves do not manipulate you.
No.
This is where the old institutions, you have to remember that we have a Versailles to deal with, right? What politics tries to do is to manipulate the algorithms. That's politics. Okay? What commercialism, the bad part, crony capitalism, tries to do is to corrupt the algorithms. It tries to corrupt the algorithms. And then the third aspect of that is that what academia and mass media try to do is to conform the algorithms, because it's terrified of anything that's exceptional and stands out, like Bitcoin, for example. So conformation, manipulation, and corruption are the problems involved here, because the old elites are three elites, and they try to use their weapons. The algorithms themselves do none of this, right? The algorithm in itself reflects you, and it's free and open. And if it's not, change the fucking algorithm. Go for an algorithm that reflects you and your desires, which is that it reflects you and your past and people who are like you, to give you preferences. And then preferably you throw in an element of randomness to it as well. Otherwise, you just repeat yourself. That's where intelligence starts.
You're describing Noster and the Noster movement.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is a movement out of this old paradigm. And having these zaps included in it, it's almost like you feel guilty if you just press the like button when you can shoot like 21 sats to someone, like a fraction of a cent. And when you have that power, and when people have that power, the thing is, this is going to play out over many, many years. And the rest of the world, the normies, as we call them, will see Bitcoiners and people on Noster thrive and being able to like supersede the rest of the world, and you're being able to do what they want, basically.
We call them Netocrats in our box.
I'm curious to how you found me, by the way.
Because I'm doing anthropology in Bitcoin communities around the world, and my team are basically looking at the entire planet to see where Bitcoin communities are popping up at the moment. So I've been very involved with the Cryptanarchy Institute in Prague for several years. Therefore, it's fine. The book, The Netocrats, inspired Rick Salkting, and should be credited for founding the power.
Yeah. He was great.
But ever since Salkting and I were out there together like 20 years ago, we're sort of part of the pantheon, like we were the thinkers of these revolutions. That was the pirate movement back then. It became the Bitcoin movement today. So it's the same type of people. And then suddenly there are technological breakthroughs that change everything forever. And then the giants wake up. And the giants wake up and see that their interests are threatened.
Yes.
And then they threaten guys like us with violence and shit like that.
Which is what's happening right now.
Yeah. Which is what we call paradigm shifts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Falkring, what's he doing these days? He turned into like he ended up in the wrong camp in the fork that convinced me of Bitcoin's superiority. Where he ended up
money from Bitcoin, that's for sure. He lives as a recluse in Germany these days.
He became a Bitcoin Cash guy in 2017.
Okay.
And
so these are the cults are different. The cults are war.
You can call it that as much as you want. Like I can give you the argument.
Everything starts with the cult.
I don't mind it either.
The Hebrews leaving Egypt was a fucking cult. Is that the point? And they said, okay, let's with us because we're the new thing, right? You want to stay in fucking Egypt and be slave forever? Or do you want to leave and start somewhere else? And the people who start fresh conquer the world. It starts with the cult. Everything starts with the cult. So instead of the sovereign individual, if I written that book, I would have called the book The Sovereign Tribe.
All right.
Because I don't do individualism. I do tribalism. I think people do things together.
How do you square that with libertarianism, though?
I'm not a libertarian. I'm a tribalist.
All right, then.
I believe in splitting power before you construct anything. So I think the U.S. Constitution is fantastic. It will probably save the United States once more against communist China because it institutes the splitting of power. And it has to be split along the imaginary and the symbolic and the real. Because the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real, how human beings perceive the world. Because they perceive the world in three different ways. You will have three different power structures eventually in any stable system. So once you go through a paradigm and the paradigm establishes itself, you realize what it's all about. You will discover that the imaginary takes a new form, the symbolic takes a new form, and the real takes a new form. And what I'm interested in here is what role Bitcoin will have in the value communication between these, which of course of intense interest. It certainly will be Bitcoin driven. I'm completely convinced of that.
Excellent. Which is your favorite founding father? Who is your favorite founding father?
I don't know. It's a good question. They're all Freemasons, by the way. So the American religion is Freemasonry, which leads all the way back to the Persians. So there you go.
Yeah, I love the Franklin quote. Any society will give up a little freedom for a little temporary security will deserve neither and lose both.
Yeah, I think libertarians are shamanoids and shamanoids are pioneers. The problem is that
shamanoid,
the proportion of, this is data anthropology. I'll give you a few key keys here. So, 92% of the human population are regular Joes and Jills. 92%, right? 4% of any human population are androgynous. We call them LGBT people or queer people or whatever. And the remaining 4% are shamanoid. So this was discovered in sexology, interesting enough, in the 1960s, 1970s. It turned out some people didn't even get the question of what sexual orientation is because they were like, I can get turned on by just about anything. Who cares? So the shamanoid are borderless and limitless. And what they do is that the shamanoid live outside the tribes and walk in between the tribes. So the shamanoid, they call shamanoid because the shamanoid basically have a monopoly on communication, hey, Bitcoins, communication with the outside world. So what you do when you live in the tribe is that you basically have a membrane around the tribe. You have to have a membrane, intelligent. You have to get nutrition in, you have to get shit out. Okay? Otherwise, you don't survive. Inside the membrane at the center, you have what's called the inner circuit, which is basically a matriarchy. It's basically women and children. You have an outer circuit, which is basically men, which is the patriarchy with the men, where you go hunting, you go to war. It's an out between those two, in that borderland, you have the androgynous. That's why I always tell people that the gay guys are the ones who fix your wife's hair. And the lesbian women are the ones you go hunting with, and they shoot and boost before you even get your fucking gun out, right? So they're brilliant because they're go-betweens. Shamanoids are go-betweens in the same way, but between tribes. Just skip the whole sexual connotation here, except that shamanoids fuck more than anybody else, but that's a different story. But the shamanoid are men and women who go between tribes. And I've seen this line in New Guinea, in the Brazilian jungle. It's just, they go to work, they literally kill each other on the Sunday afternoon. They don't play football, they do kill each other. But the shamanoids, they just go straight through the field and nobody shoots at them. But they are obviously the peaceful communication between tribes, even at work. Now, once you got a monopoly talking to strangers and nobody else is allowed to talk to strangers. A monopoly
on what?
If you have a monopoly on talking to the outside world.
Talking to the outside world, okay.
If you are from a tribe,
you there
kill
for what?
any stranger you meet, right? You kill them, right? Because otherwise they kill you. Now, if you are the kind of guy who completely demilitarizes anything you deal with when you deal with strangers, because they are go-betweens, the shadow would go between tribes. So they're born to be going between tribes and born to be independent in the wilderness and to care of themselves in the wilderness. That's why monasteries are located in the wilderness, right? So the shaman are go-betweens. Now, if you got a monopoly on communicating with strangers, you've got a monopoly on communicating with the forefathers, with the gods, with the demons, with anything else out there. So probably you take tons of drugs and put in the fucking costume and then you tell people what God just said to you.
Hence the shaman part of the word.
Bitcoin people today are vastly shamanoid. It's not 4% of the Bitcoin population. When I study you guys, I discover, oh my God, it's more like at least 40% of you guys. And some of them are a little bit autistic or whatever, but 40% are shamanoid. Like they are so libertarian, so freedom loving. They just want to get out in the wilderness. So they go to countries like El Salvador and set up new businesses and introduce Bitcoin to corrupt old third world governments. And suddenly it seems to work. You're perfect because you're finding the cracks in the old system by nature. It's like you love living in Panama. Like that makes sense because these territories we're looking at now are the new shamanoid territories where this experimentation takes place. The connecting place where you guys will do business eventually are places like Dubai, Switzerland, and Panama. And then the fiat currency world, which is like America, Europe, China, whatever, you don't even need it. Nope. They will need you.
Yeah.
Because he went ahead. So this is why I'm saying this is like the Hebrews in Egypt. It's an exodus. It's an exodus out of a former paradigm into a new one. And this is exactly what I'm saying, that keep the fucking algorithms free and open. You just explained it's already happening. Brilliant. Keep the algorithms free from manipulation and corruption and conformation. Keep them free from those systems. Keep them yours. If you keep the algorithm yours, I think the ultimate coin is algorithm on one side and Bitcoin on the other, meaning blockchain on the other. So if you got blockchain on one side of a coin, algorithm on the other, that's true.
Well, that's a time chain and Noster. It's Bitcoin and Noster. That is it.
It's truth. It's the most valuable thing that exists. It's truth.
Yeah. And that's what Bitcoin is.
Yeah.
It's truth.
Undisputable truth. And we never had that before in large
consensual
populations.
Truth. Like,
we only experienced truth in small populations. And then anything beyond that was compromise on truth or pollution of truth, whatever, the best we could do before we went to war, started leash mobbing each other again. The problem is always larger populations with human beings. Now it's possible to create systems, even empires of large populations of human beings that can explore, do their own thing. Yeah. Uncompromisingly so, peacefully.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's one of the fucking biggest revolutions ever.
Yeah. It is. And it's gonna propel everything forward so fast. Like it's gonna change everything. Absolutely.
But see how I know that I see technology developing so quickly and so many people are on board. And that's why I love the Bitcoin cult. I don't have a problem at all just going religious. I think it should be because then people are willing to die for this idea. Brilliant. Okay. Because it's that good. Okay. Now, if that's the case, then any flaw that pops up because the chest isn't really nailed yet will be solved very quickly by technologists who understand the magic of Bitcoin. I'm convinced of that since the last 3 years. If I was a skeptic before that, this was the only flaw I saw, was that it couldn't solve its own flaws in enough time. Therefore, now the standard could be given a chance that imitated Bitcoin but could improve on it. I don't think it's going to happen at all. I think the standard is well enough, it's good enough, ask the platform to build this skyscraper out. Undoubtedly so.
Yeah, and for instance, the threat of quantum computing that people bring up every now and then Bitcoin has at least 10 minutes to fix the problem. The rest of the banking system does not. It will just crumble and fall.
We have solved that problem, right? That problem has been solved already.
Yeah. It's just an example of how much the rest of the world is much more fragile than Bitcoin is. And everything in computers is much more fragile than Bitcoin. This is the most robust thing there is.
Yes.
Yeah. What did you think about the book, by the way?
No, I'd comment on it when you read my books. It's another podcast.
All right. Excellent. We'll do another one after I read your
my
books.
philosophy students I'm like, listen, if you haven't studied Barth or Syntheism, yet you haven't studied Hegel and Nietzsche, you can't even discuss with me. It's embarrassing. Go back and do the work. Like,
all right.
Kids these days,
I
come
need
up to you and they sound so fucking smart. And then you look at them and say, no, you just surfed the internet and you just been alone on Wikipedia. But actually, when I give you a test question to see if you read the books or not, you haven't. That means you have no depth to your analysis. I tell all my students today, the best thing you could invest time in today, speaking of being solid like Bitcoin, is to read books.
Yes,
you have
absolutely.
to. There's no way to get to wisdom. There's no shortcut. No quick fix. Name dropping won't pay off. Name dropping will be discovered so quickly in the next few years that you'll be exposed into the like, you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't done the work, as you say. So the work has to be done. But I can explain what it's about. So what John Söderqvist and I wrote the 6 books is that the first 3 books, we started playing around with the idea that a paradigm shift was happening. And the internet was the most radical revolution ever. And with this, we include Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just one aspect of the internet. Basically, the internet swallows everything. The first book, The Netocrats, came out 2000. It was prophetic. We could then decide to go for coffee table books and bestsellers and sell books because we sold the world. We sold hundreds of thousands of copies of The Netocrats, right?
Nice.
Yes, it was good. So
that's a lot.
Yeah. We got big in places like India and South Africa and Russia rather than America, which I thought was refreshing because everybody else aims for America. Anyway, 2003, we released our second book, The Global Empire, and we decided to go real deep. So it's a difficult book. It's real philosophy, authentic philosophy, right? Really deep shit, right? Why we did write that book in 2003 is that we realized that we could actually do this, pursue this, and we're going to go more narrow and go deeper rather than becoming bestsellers and enjoy the same whatever. I'd been a rock star before, so, I'd done that, right? And John agreed with me. Let's go deep. The global empire has been widely misunderstood as expected. We even warned about it in the forward. But the global empire basically says there's a planet Earth. There's network dynamics, and we know network dynamic works. It's just a network of nodes that gets you out of an anarchy and moves you into some ordered system. Network dynamics is here, right? If you put the network dynamics onto a planet, we don't have a word for that. We suggest the term the global empire. Please note here, the global empire is simply technological. Technology is going towards the one. Technology is no reason at all not to be one. If we all have a little guardian angel called an AI sitting here, next to us in a year from now, all the guardian angels will be connected one another into one. So the problem here is that they're all to the one. It's time to speak monotheism properly rather than just polytheism here. We laid out in the Global Empire 2003. People are smart now who see AI happening, the red steel wall from another genius, by the way, parallel with us. They realized to go all the way back to that book 2003 because we laid it out in that book. We laid out the dialectics of eternalism and globalism. We laid out terminology. We laid out how human beings actually operate. We laid out how we go for ambivalence before we go for anything else. We laid out basically what we're doing now in detail. And then we wrote a book called The Modern Machines in 2009. And that's the death of the individual. you'd hate to hear this as a libertarian, but actually we code the individual in that book. We just say we're all tribal beings and we're very schizoid. So that's okay. But anyway, after that, we decided to go for a new trilogy, and that's the one we're completing this year. Syntheism, Creating God and the Internet, Age 2, 2014, is the first book about the future. First about the future. Second book, Digital Libido, Sex, Power, and Violence in the Network Society. Messy, apocalyptic. It's going to get really messy now. We all know that, right? Escape to Honduras while you can. That's the second book, 2018. The third book coming up this year, Process Event, rewrites all of history until then. As if the whole point was that AI, blockchain, the internet would rise. As in everything we ever did for the last 10,000 years aimed in this direction. And that's the book coming up this year. And then we're finished.
All right. So
we're just going to comment on our work. So now you know about the 6 books, why we wrote them, and why part of Syntheism. They're going to have fun, live in Tuscany, drink tons of wine, and maybe take tons of drugs or whatever, have fun. And basically just comment on our work, which I'm doing at the moment here in this beautiful podcast. So there you go.
That's nice. The thing about the shamanoids, or what's that? What you call them?
Shamanoids. The shamanic caste. Shamanoids are 4% of any given human population anywhere in the world.
All right. My dear friend, Dr. Yoni Appleberg, who makes the animations for my little Bitcoin thoughts, usually, he's studied psychedelics and Bitcoin, and he found some interesting parallels in that.
It gets interesting.
Now they open up pathways in the brain that weren't there before, in the same manner as psychedelics does. So, like psychedelics, you can hear colors and see sounds and such, and time works differently. Bitcoin is the same thing. You get a new concept of time. Like, is time really something that it can be objectively observed, or that we have to like Gigi writes that Bitcoin is time, that we decide what time is by what goes on in the time chain, and we can like sync towards that, and like all the other different pathways.
The creation of history.
Yeah. So all the other pathways the Bitcoin rabbit hole provides you with, this whole notion that you are your Bitcoins and all of this, it's all very new agey and hippie-ish. But Bitcoin sort of arrives at all of those conclusions by being as rigorous as possible along the way, which is so fascinating. So you get into these, almost shamanistic insights about the nature of humanity by just not believing in anything, but just verifying every step and doing logical deduction all the way.
Yeah.
And that's why I find
it is the logos, nothing to do with pathos and mythos. And I always recommend people before they start studying the Bitcoin community to watch out. Not everybody has a good sex life. Only trust people who have a good sex life. If they don't have a good sex life, they're too much in the logos, have forgotten about the pathos, can't get the mythos together and identity, and
very good advice.
Yeah,
very good
and
advice.
Basically, they're autistic. So be a full human being. I think Finn agrees with us here. It's just like be a full human being. Do you
think you can have a good sex life with only one partner? Do you think you can have a monogamous good sex life, or does it require more than one partner?
I don't understand. You said monogamy. What does that word mean?
I know you're an advocate.
It sounds incredibly boring.
Yeah,
it means.
Well, it depends. I would say if you've done polygamy for 15 years straight and you want to try something else, I recommend monogamy for a while.
Oh God, how boring! What are you going to do? Go for celibacy next?
Maybe. Why not?
Oh, why?
I like trying new things.
What? It's not new.
Oh,
it's just denial.
This depends.
How tragic.
No, I think that depends very much on who you are and what your preferences are and what your priorities are in life. Like,
that's true. That's true. Okay. So like any truth, monogamy is a very temporary phenomenon. Finn, what do you say? We get Finn into this conversation.
Yeah.
I think this is where Finn comes on. Finn,
Yeah. Perfect. Hey, so no, this has been a fantastic conversation. I had no idea where this was going to go because I
still have no idea where it's going.
Pretty much, yeah. But I'll give it an initial thought here. So everything you're talking about the shamanoid and the internal structures of society, this has been super interesting to me. I've dabbled in shamanoid type stuff, as in I did reconstructive religion, especially Scandinavian and some Finnic stuff for a few years. And I think what I was trying to explore there was what is the insight and the knowledge and wisdom that was in that system of beliefs that got overshadowed by Christianity, monogamous religion, that sort of thing. And I found a few things there. It's a tangent, definitely. Maybe we'll talk about it another time. But
I've got friends in Finland you need to see, Finn.
Sounds
yes. Finland is boiling with these ideas. So yeah, drop the email address. Knut can drop it to me afterwards. So I just had a conversation with Knut before this, but it's the first time I meet Finn here. So yeah,
sure,
go ahead.
Sounds great. Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that connection.
Finn is called Luke, and his BTC pseudo Finn on Twitter.
All right. I call him Finn because Canadian living in Finland. So that's why I call him Finn.
I appreciate that, by the way.
That's a good name.
Luke, go on.
No, I'm doing my best Finn impression. So I'll take that as a compliment. What I was looking at in kind of those areas and what I kind of found was that the monogamous religions were trying to suppress this shamanoid type stuff, and of course you have Sufi and other traditions of mysticism within the monogamous religions, but they really pushed that down. And they're Finnish examples, but the Scandinavian example from shamanism is Odin, who I identified with quite greatly for a while because of the story of a sacrifice. I've told the story of Odin hanging on the world tree on this podcast before. I won't say it again quite now, but the idea is he sacrificed himself to discover the runes. And so I'm getting down to all of this. What is your take on the role of this kind of monotheistic religion and how that has shaped history over the last century or so?
I would say, as a theologist, and I'm a syntheologist, I think technology should be done theologically speaking. I would say that it's not monotheism itself that's a problem here. It's the popularity of Christianity and Islam was because they were perfect for a feudal society. So that's why Putin is still Putin and the Islamists are the only guys left defending it because it's feudal. So the problem with Putin is that his ideas are 600 years old. 2 paradigms have passed. Time to wake up, mister. Just like that's what it is. It's same thing with Islamists in Syria and Iraq. So I converted to Zoroastrianism, which invented monotheism. But Zoroastrianism invented in a very clever way. To begin with, the mono is split. It has to be split. It's split in 3. It was inherited in vulgar versions of Trinity Christianity. It was certainly inherited by Judaism, but as the 3 siblings, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam leading the Exodus. But what it is actually is that it's the will to intelligence is separated from the will to transcendence. So Nietzsche is right about the will to power, but the will to power must be split. It's the willingness or eagerness to learn and to learn more and more. And the will to transcendence is the eagerness to use what you learned to create something novel that never existed before. And of course, the AI can do will intelligence and assist it, but it cannot do will to transcendence, for example. So this is split in Zoroastrianism. In the Ahura and the Master. The Master is mind and Ahura is being. So it's a religion that has no supernatural entities whatsoever. What I then discovered when I started doing this, I converted in 1996. I started both Buddhism and Taoism in parallel, was that I discovered that these 3 rich traditions, Buddhism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, will survive. Islam and Christianity will go into sort of supernova states of fundamentalism before they implode and die. And the reason is simple. We can no longer have religions that don't believe that death is the absolute. We cannot have religions that are so fucking childish that run around telling us about eternal lives or lives after death. Because that was just the biggest ever. You told people in the church or the mosque that, oh, if you work hard this week as a slave to your master, you get to go to heaven.
Hinduism.
Biggest lie ever, right?
Same thing.
That lie is finally totally exposed. And there's nothing left of Christianity and Islam because they're completely built on that assumption. Without that assumption, there's nothing there. Christianity and Islam were forced onto people as slave mentalities, Nietzsche calls them, and they're over. And Christianity is literally dying as we speak, right? So that's what's happening. I think death as the absolute has to be the starting point. Like everything date when it's overdone with, and that's the point. And because that's date when it's overdone with, it has value draws.
Can I just make a point? I'm so happy that you say this, Alexander, because there's a whole chapter on this in my Everything Divided by 21 Million book on morality, that Bitcoin is perfect money because it reflects the scarcity of a human lifetime perfectly. And if you had an entity that was indestructible and could live forever, that entity would never act because it could always postpone everything to the day after. So a prerequisite for human action or any action, deliberate, made out of free will, which we can have another debate on another time. There's a necessity for life to be scarce in order for anyone to do anything.
Yeah, like, and freedom will have nothing to do with each other. You can skip the big question right there.
But the whole thing is that's what gives it value, and that's why something scarce is valuable. Like that's what motivates us to do stuff at all. So that's the basic premise.
The only follow up to this entire thing that I wanted to tie this back into was the what do you see as the significance of this shamanoid group having some freedom now that the forces that are acting against this shamanoid are not quite so powerful anymore?
Well, if you can do what you want, you will do so. And that's exactly why all the people that talk to the Bitcoin community have gone global. So again, titled 20 years ago, The Global Empire. That means that the first people who identify themselves as global and would be nomads are going to be the winners. The people who somewhere are attached to a certain place are going to end up losers. So it's not even somewheres and anywheres. It's somewheres, anywheres, and everywheres. The everywheres are coming now. I think Bitcoin is opening the door to the everywheres, because before this, it was the war between the anywheres and the somewheres, which is the culture war. But actually, the everywheres have escaped the culture war altogether. They're not interested in perfectly shamanoid behavior.
That's us. That's us.
Yeah. To study right now, this is why we do, the new book is an exodology. So it's a book on how you conduct an exodus. An exodus can either be done territorially, or it can be done virtually, meaning it can be done in time. So you can just say that I'm moved into a new historical paradigm. I intend to live with the values that come out of that paradigm. For example, I intend to use Bitcoin, nothing else, to value communication. And then I intend to go somewhere where I can practice that. And that's the exodus. And there were probably a lot of different places, which I think is great. I love the Bitcoin cults. I love the Bitcoin communities. I love the plurality of it. I think it makes perfect sense because it's a movement to people who love decentralization. Why? Because any system that is centralized will go after the shamanoids and kill them. Every damn lynch mob in history has killed either a shamanoid or androgynous person. If you look at the maps of Europe, and Luke, being a Canadian, you're still a Europe freak because you're into Europe, you live in Finland, right? Every medieval town in Europe the whorehouse and the house of the executioner are the two houses at the port. Right? Because they together, they're the same characters, one with testosterone, one without. But, the whore and the executioner do all the dirty work. They keep the entire society together. They know they're doing it. All the people are spitting at them, but they don't care. Typically shamanoid behavior. Shamanoid people do the right thing. And if you spit at them, they don't care because they don't care what you think of it. Because you don't understand what they're doing. They don't get it. You're just ignoring it. You don't get what I'm doing, right? But every medieval town, the whorehouse and the executioner's house are right at the port so they can escape quickly when things get messy inside the town and people go start a lynch mob, right?
Being a sailor, right? I know that there are more reasons to why they're closer to the port.
Okay. It doesn't contradict what I just said. Certainly more reasons.
No,
right?
It doesn't.
It's a certain intelligence involved here. It's shamanoid intelligence. The pointer being that there's a connection between the two that I find interesting. And if there's one thing I would love to study besides the communities I'm studying, is the study of sex workers dealing with Bitcoin. I think sex workers are the perfect target group for Bitcoin.
They are. They are.
It makes sense too, because they love the connections that their value communication is so solid. They can trust the value they have in their pocket or whatever. But at the same time, it's outside the fiat system, meaning they want to do their shit without laws and order involved. They're perfectly fine doing that because they're always ostracized by the normies anyway. And this way, I think, weirdly enough, it makes sense to read Michel Foucault, because Michel Foucault was actually in Nietzsche. He was not a Marxist at all, as he reminded everybody repeatedly. He was in Nietzsche, but he did Nietzsche in reverse. He started looking at what does it mean to take the theist perspective and start from the bottom of society and discover how rotten power is. How disgusting, which is to me, I don't know of any Western philosopher at least who is as shamanic as Foucault. So I'm a huge fan of Foucault, but I read Foucault as a libertarian would read Foucault. But he's the guy to study.
A point of slight disagreement on the decentralization. I think I speak for a lot of Bitcoiners when I say that decentralization is not an end in itself, but it's an unfortunate means to an end. And the end sought is the global free market with sound money. And unfortunately, we can't trust one another. So we need decentralization to set up the game theoretical groundwork that works. So we have this system. And it's unfortunate that we have to, because that's why it's slow, and that's why we have transaction fees and all this stuff. It's because we need to always check one another so that we don't cheat. And that's the only point of decentralization in Bitcoin is to create this thing. It's necessary for us to have that in order to be able to. I'm about to say trust, but I mean we can verify everything in it because it's decentralized.
You pointed to an interesting flaw that actually could help to not use technology. How have we historically tried to create trust between large populations?
Well,
religion.
It's
that's what
third
religion
parties.
means. Really, God, it means what connects people. So what you do is that with religion, you try to connect people that otherwise wouldn't trust each other. I'll give you a perfect example. You know Peter Turchin, historian, data anthropologist, right? He's read widely these days, Russian guy. Ultraviolence, great book. Okay. What Turchin proved was a theory we had that he proved. The theory was that the first 1,000 years of permanent settlement in Mesopotamia was just bloody. Bloody like hell. People killed all the time. But because you had food, 7 out of 8 kids survived. So you still had a population increase, but constant warfare. About 1,000 years into that experience, a couple of guys found out that if I represent Euphrates and you represent Tigris, and they're two different valleys, and we build a fucking temple in between the two rivers, and then I walk up the stairs here as Ziggurat, I walk up the stairs here, and then I declare that, hey, Valley of the Euphrates people, we have a god called Tipi, and then you walk up the other stair from the Tigris Valley towards the top, and you say, hey, people of the Tigris Valley, we have a god called Didi. Okay. Didi and Pipi have been at war with each other for 1,000 years, right? But we started looking into the history of Pipi and Didi and discovered that Pipi and Didi actually had Mimi as their shared ancestor. They're brothers. What a tragedy. Stop killing each other. You should be brothers, right? So you extend the idea of the people to a larger population. It worked.
Yeah.
It worked massively because what happened was that death rates fell dramatically. The next 1,000 years, Mesopotamia's population grew to half the population of the entire planet, and the Mesopotamian model for civilization became the standard. Yeah. Now, this is what we call religion. And if there's anything besides game theory that can create trust in larger populations that we know historically, it's religion. That's one of the great proponents of saying that it would be nice if the Bitcoin cult took their cultism seriously.
But
started looking at religion.
But this is why Bitcoin is both, because the game theory is so beautiful. So people perceive it as a religious experience when they experience the game theory working for them. They see this, but you can actually live the meme. And to many Bitcoiners, that's a spiritual experience.
What I've discovered is that, funnily enough, family values are incredibly strong with Bitcoin people.
Yeah.
A lot of them are homeschoolers, love their kids, raise dad, mom together. And that shows that they love trust. Because family is trust. Clan is trust. All the way out to tribe, we go trust. It's just that beyond 1,500 people started to distrusting others and see others as strangers.
I thought it was 150, like 160 Dunbar's numbers.
That's clan size. That's clan size. Okay, so clan is a very, very good motivator for human beings. The tribe actually works all the way up to tribe and trust people. Once we go beyond the 1,500 threshold, trust just drops. And that's how we develop technologies and storytelling to try to get beyond that point. And I think if you can both do the storytelling, which is any religion, which is
but that's where Satoshi comes in. So, Satoshi, this messianic figure that disappeared, he is the story. And that's enough. We have the mythos here, and the example you use with the Mesopotamians between the rivers, I think is a perfect metaphor for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a perfect religion in the sense that it's both a hill to die on and a valley to live in between the wars.
I would say that we're standing with two rivers that are in a war with each other, called the dollar and the euro.
Yeah,
and the dollar and the euro cannot unify.
Well,
so again,
I would say one is already the slave of the other. One is already enslaved to the other.
Or the other way around. It doesn't matter. The thing is that there can be no fiat currency that becomes a global currency.
No.
There cannot be.
But okay,
cannot be global standard.
Let's dig a little bit deeper, a tiny bit deeper. We often talk about Bitcoin as money, but at its core, it's not money. It's just ones and zeros. It's just a way for us to conduct ourselves that mimics money, but it's simultaneously, it's something we never had. Money, in the classical sense, has always been, has never had this absolutely mathematical finiteness to it. We never had anything that's like in the Mona Lisa, the equivalent of the Mona Lisa, and there only being one, so that we can converge around. So we never had this system that is infinitely divisible with layer 2 solutions, and at the same time absolutely finite. So it's another. It's on an even deeper level than money. And when we talk about money, we often talk about the dollar or the euro, which aren't really money either. They're fiat currencies, which is just a very sad excuse for money. And as long as since 1971, when they could basically just print as many dollars as they wanted, they've been able to print oil that everyone else in the world had to pay for. That's what dollar printing is. That's what the Fed is doing. They're printing oil for the US, which is why they're way richer than we are. I got my whale ticket for Miami since I'm a speaker, and they charge fucking $21,000 for that. You can get a small house for that in Sweden if you're far enough out in the bushes. And
you can get a town in El Salvador for that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. Like the way that it has come to the point. I think people in smaller towns in Sweden wouldn't believe it if they came to the US and saw what's going on there in terms of how much money there is. Like it's all from this ever inflating bubble of stealing from everyone else. When Trump gave away $1,000 to everyone as COVID relief, the great capitalist Trump, what he was basically doing was pickpocketing everyone else on earth by printing money. Like that's what he's actually doing. So it's not capitalism, it's like global communism.
It's the benefit of having capital in an empire, but the empire is cracking.
Yeah, but it's in Marx. I mean, you've read more Marx than I have, but the central bank is absolutely crucial for Marxism to work. Like that's a basic premise for communism to happen, is that they have a central bank, that they have control over the money supply. So that's the control starts and ends, because money is a more powerful force than political ideas can ever be. Like people are motivated by this thing. And that's why it takes over. That's why everything becomes corrupt over time. That's why stupidity is the real.
I would say that the way to look at a comparative feudalism before we started printing money is the benefit of capitalism was that it was a fantastic bullshit detector. So you could go anywhere in any village of the world, and you'd have somebody standing in the street corner bragging about the fucking snake oil they will try to sell you. And that's essentially what trade looked like. Now, the thing with capital was that you could go to any place in the world and find some local coins, and you can then go and ask for the actual value according to the trader or whatever he was trying to sell you. And he was exposed. So he exposed what he actually thought of the product he was selling. So the end of advertising starts with the introduction of capitalism, in the sense that stop lying, And what happens now is that the very beauty of capitalism did create enormous wealth and a planet of 8 billion people. You have to accept that. Once it did that, capitalism did that, but now with capitalism, all the cracks, the flaws of capitalism are that there's still tons of bullshit going on. And
it's not
perfect plug to plug
It's not capitalism. It's not capitalism. In a strict praxeological sense, capitalism is just people saving money or
I'm talking
saving
about
capital
capitalism
goods.
as historical paradigms
All
in
right.
between feudalism and between your beloved Bitcoin paradigm. So capital actually means just head, caput, head in Latin. It's an idea of centralization. That's what it is. That the capital used terms like money, etc., to describe essentially value communications through printed money. That's what it was. But the thing was that the whole process of eliminating bullshit and process in human relations now kicks in a whole new gear where Bitcoin gets so interesting. So we can have more human relations with less bullshit in them. And that creates value for everybody. That's the point.
Yeah. The bullshit elimination is I've never seen a more powerful bullshit eliminator than Bitcoin. And Bitcoiners slay their heroes. As soon as someone's insincere or untruthful about something and they're immediately slaughtered. Everyone is slaying their heroes all the time. Because you can't fake it in this world, not in the real Bitcoin world. You can fake it in the crypto space, but you can't fake it here. Doesn't work. And that's, I find that's insanely beautiful. There's the duality again. If you have this new system with truth in the base layer of everything, what are we living in now? What if what we're living in now is built on top of something that is extremely untruthful?
Knut, can you explain here the difference for people who follow this conversation, how you describe Bitcoin versus crypto? So we can clarify that. I don't take it for granted people get the difference. Why don't you explain it?
The difference is we discovered a way to interact with one another voluntarily and with consent that was set up in such a way that game theoretically it was more expensive to try to cheat the system than following the rules. That's what Bitcoin is. So it's a fixed agreement on a rule set. That's very hard to change because everyone needs to agree that the change is good for the network. In other words, it can only change for the better. And the point is everything on a computer can be copied and is copied all the time. So we found a way to get around that. And to me, that discovery is as big as discovering a time machine. Because what it enables is that we have now this finite number in mathematics that we can share and use to express value to one another. And we never had that before. Some say it's digital gold, and it's like gold in the sense that it gets harder and harder over time to find new gold. So the existing stock is bigger than the flow of new gold. But in Bitcoin, that is totally predictable because it's built in such a way so that on average, a new block is found every 10 minutes. So new Bitcoins are distributed every 10 minutes. Miners don't create Bitcoin. Everyone creates the Bitcoins. Everyone in the network, like the users attached to a node runner that runs the node, the market creates the Bitcoins, and we all benefit if we follow the rules. So that therefore the Bitcoins are created and it grows stronger over time. The crypto is not this. Crypto is insincere people trying to piggyback off of this great discovery. So it's people trying to imagine Columbus discovers America. And then there's a bunch of other sailors claiming that they also discovered a new continent when they didn't. That's sort of what it is, because how everyone knows these basic parameters of Bitcoin, like the 21 million cap, the 10-minute intervals between blocks, like the difficulty adjustment every 2 weeks or 2016 blocks. Nobody knows anything about this in the greater crypto space, but in this shift from the old system to the new. Crypto is like fiat on steroids because it's the quickest way to fool people and be this leeching parasite up on everyone else's gullibility. That's what it is. So you can start a new coin, issue 1 billion tokens, and sell one for $1,000, and there you have a market cap of $1 trillion, and all of a sudden you go up, and they compare these bullshit things. When in reality, nothing happened. You sold a bullshit token to your friend and it doesn't prove anything. So all of these are pumped up because it's a lot of people are making a lot of money out of these bullshit things that a lot of gullible people fall for.
Ponzi schemes.
Yeah, they're all Ponzi schemes.
Yes.
All of them. Ethereum is the biggest one. It's the mother asshole from which all other shitcoins are spawned, as Seyfedin put it so beautifully a couple of months back. And
Please note here, there's no temple between Euphrates and Tigris when it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Like if you're
Absolutely
Ethereum,
not.
you're done. You're done.
Ethereum
You're
is the
old school.
opposite.
Yeah, you corrupted by the old school.
No,
go on.
It's not old school. It's a scam from beginning to end, and that's why they need to change the narrative all the time. Bitcoin has a very fixed narrative, and that's why people realize what it is, and they can hop on, and it can grow stronger over time. Ethereum needs to change all the time because it's not sustainable, and not in any way. They needed to move to what they call proof of stake, which is actually the biggest nothing burger in existence. A fraction. Proof of stake is fractional reserve banking. It's not tied to anything actually costly in reality. Bitcoin is tied to sacrificing electricity to guess a specific number.
The key here is that the old banks love Ethereum and they're terrified of Bitcoin.
Yes, so
Speaks
they
volumes,
flood money. So money is being flooded into every one of these piggybacking bullshit things, and that's why it's so hard to see the signal through the noise. But a blockchain can do 2 out of 3 things. It has decentralization, security, and scalability, and you can only choose 2 out of 3. They need to optimize for 2. And Bitcoin chose to optimize for decentralization and security, and therefore they couldn't scale as fast. So you hear this opponent saying, "Oh, we can only handle 7 transactions per second." But that's why we need the Lightning Network to be built on top. But the real kicker
Problem has been solved.
Yeah. And every other crypto needed to differentiate itself from Bitcoin so much so they could be marketed as something else. So it needed to be scalable. Therefore sacrificing one of the other 2 corners of the triangle, and therefore sacrificing both, because without security, you're not decentralized. Without decentralization, you're not secure. So they're bound to be corrupt and taken over by or if they weren't already taken over. But the real scaling solution is that, as I see it, and I might be alone on this hill, but it's that as we move into hyper-Bitcoinization and this new paradigm, people won't spend as much as they do now because they now have deflationary money, so they're incentivized to save. We're also incentivized to help one another more, us Bitcoiners, because we know if we help one another, we help Bitcoin succeed. So we all benefit from helping one another. The final point, I think the notion of a company will disappear as well, as the notion of a nation state will, because we don't need them anymore. We can just collaborate with one another without calling it this thing. And we can build new profit models where everyone gets a cut of the profit instead of having salaries and stuff like that in much easier ways. But the real scaling solution is that we won't need money as much as we do now. We won't need to transact as much as we do now because consumerism is gone. And by ending consumerism and prioritizing quality over quantity, we solve every other problem. We solve you can't fix the environment without fixing that problem first. I still cling on to this, we're the ones that are breaking out of the cult of statism and fiat currencies. We're the ones breaking out.
No.
The cult.
I disagree. We are the cult.
Okay.
And I love being inside a cult, and I love religion, and I love religion finally getting it right.
Bitcoin changed my views of religion. I still call myself an atheist, but now I view statism as the worst religion of them all. Only statism has created world wars. Even whatever religion Genghis Khan had was not as bad as fucking Stalinism. So that's the worst. Any appeal to authority is bullshit to me.
You're a screaming synthist.
Yes,
the synthist claims that we didn't need God for the universe to exist. There are no God there, but there will be.
But I'm not a synthist. I play guitar. I don't play synth.
I think you just claimed that Bitcoin is gone.
Yeah. Well, here's another.
You're a synthist.
Here's another interesting one for you. Pascal's wager actually works with Bitcoin because, Pascal's wager says that you might as well believe in God because if you don't, hell and so on and so forth. That actually works with Bitcoin because if you believe in it or And if you work for it, then you actually increase its chances of becoming a reality. So,
Luke, what do you say about this? You're the closest one of the three of us to become the Bitcoin porn star. So why don't you give your perspective what Sue just said about religion here?
That's really, I've never heard that before.
He means it as a compliment, Luke.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So don't take it the wrong way.
Thank you. I don't take it the wrong way. I think this entire conversation has been fascinating in the sense of pulling on Knut's the interesting takes that I find it refreshing that you come here, Alexander, and hear what he has to say, and that it sounds religious. And I don't see the negative there. The Pascal's wager question, very specifically, I agree with this definitely in the sense of that. I also draw in Jeff Booth here, who's been talking a lot about this stuff. That putting energy and effort into Bitcoin is what will take away the power from the fiat system, essentially. And so, by aligning yourself, every individual aligning themselves towards Bitcoin is going to, no matter whether they hold Bitcoin, have a lot of it, buy it, invest it, whatever, just by aligning towards it, it's going to increase the odds of this system working. And the more people who figure this out and decide to do this opt-out, the better. And I hope it doesn't have to just be the people on the margins forever. It's got to eventually make its way into the tribes. It's got to eventually make its way in to everyone. That's what I take from this conversation.
What a fantastic ending for this conversation. Luke, you pulled it off.
The show is also sponsored and produced by Consensus Network, the first Bitcoin-only publishing house. Consensus specializes in translations of Bitcoin books and also publishes original titles in English and many other languages. Check out bitcoinbook.shop or consensus.network to see everything Consensus has to offer. We're also always looking for new contributors, whether you have a book you want to publish, you want to help translate books into your native language, or you have some other way you want to get involved. So if you want to help spread the Bitcoin message, reach out to us by Twitter or email. Details are in the show notes. And finally, you can check out knutsvanholm.com for everything Knut, including some great Everything Divided by 21 Million merch and the Infinity Red limited edition wine. That's knutsvanholm.com for everything Knut.
Yeah, Alexander, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. This is our first of this is the first one out of many conversations, I believe. And
there will be definitely there'll be tons of conversation. I am thrilled to be part of the community as an anthropologist or whatever in any way I can serve. I totally subscribe to what Luke just said. I'm putting my heart and soul into this. Absolutely.
And I know that you're a sincere guy. You've been a contrarian, and I've been following your paths all my life, almost. No, not all my life, but since my teens. And I salute you for being brave in the political climate in Sweden and speaking out there. I chose the more cowardly path to just fuck off and do this somewhere else. But anyway, I'm looking forward to having more great conversations like this in the future. And I hope you enjoy Honduras a lot. And I can put you in touch with all the Free Cities Foundation people if you need that. And looking forward to everything.
Would you like to direct our audience anywhere, Alexander? Where can they find you?
Oh, okay. I don't have to do sales pitches. If you want to Google Alexander Bard, you'll find me there. I mean, if you're interested in studying what I do as a philosopher, read the damn books. I'm also a member of the intellectual deep web. I think the people who are watching this conversation all the way through are certainly material for that. So you find me no media like Facebook or drop me a message or something. But the intellectual deep web is about 450 members. It started in North America and Europe, figuring out that leading young artists and philosophers needed to get together and finding a conversation. It's exploded. It's gone global. It has enormous effect on these things. And for example, Bitcoin discussions are the mainstay of the intellectual deep web conversation. So get hold of me somewhere on the social media. I'm on Twitter or Facebook, and then you can get an intellectual deep web.
Yeah. Are there audiobooks your books in audio?
Yeah, actually, we just fired all the actors who read the audiobooks because we're going to let the AI do the audiobooks from now on. So all the 6 books for me and John are republished this fall when Prosimint comes out. And I think we decided on Swedish, English, Russian, Spanish, German, and French, having philosophers to translate us, and then lead the rest of the AI or something like that. We're right in the middle of the paradigm shift there too. So it's fascinating to be a writer.
All right, I'll start reading I'll start reading them when the audiobooks are done. So ping me when they are.
So they will. You will.
All right.
Check out the Syntheism book. It certainly plays into what we just been talking about. Bitcoin's mentioned in the book as well.
Yeah, it won't make me start playing keyboards, I hope.
Bye for now, guys.
Bye for now.
Yeah,
bye
for thanks so much.
Yeah.
This has been the Freedom Footprint Show. Thanks for listening.